The first thunderclap cracked so close it felt like the air itself split in half. I was 5 miles deep in the Bitterroot backcountry, high on a ridgeline that had seemed like a fine place to stop for lunch just 20 minutes earlier. Now, with the wind howling and the sky rolling into a bruised purple, that open ridge looked like the worst possible place to be. My pack leaned against a boulder, half unzipped, the smell of pine sap thick on the air. I didn't even bother packing properly, just shoved everything inside and yanked the straps tight. When you're that exposed and the heavens start throwing spears of fire, every second counts. The storm came in from the west, faster than I thought possible. One moment there was still daylight, thin and grey, but daylight. And the next, I could see the rain sheet moving across the valley below, erasing trees, ridgelines, everything. The hairs on my arms lifted. That strange, static warning you never forget once you felt it. I crouched low, scanning the terrain for somewhere, anywhere to go. Lightning cracked again, this time blindingly close, and I could smell ozone, sharp and metallic. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. The tree line was too far. I had maybe a quarter mile of bare granite between me and the nearest stand of firs. Running across open rock in a lightning storm was suicidal, but staying put wasn't any better. My eyes darted, desperate, and that's when I saw it. A split in the hillside, half hidden behind a tumble of snowmelt boulders. It wasn't a cave, more like a crack in the mountain, maybe 4 feet high, deep enough to swallow some shadow. It wasn't much, but it was something. I dropped to a crouch and ran, counting seconds between flash and boom. 1,000. 2-1. Crack! The ground vibrated under my boots. I could feel it in my teeth. The rain came in sideways, icy and thick. The trail turned slick instantly, and twice I almost went down. I didn't even notice the cut on my knee until later. By the time I reached the split in the rock, I was soaked straight through, lungs burning, legs shaking, trembling slightly from cold and adrenaline. The flash and boom continued, each one so close it felt personal, like the sky had singled me out. I could smell the tang of ozone even in my shelter, that sharp electric scent that says, "You were nearly next." Minutes stretched. There's a strange sense of time during storms like that. Seconds feel like hours, and your world shrinks to the size of your heartbeat. Every flash lit up the edges of my small refuge, illuminating the trickles of water running down the stone, the steam rising from my soaked clothes. I focused on breathing slowly, counting out each inhale. Fear, I've learned, is like a fire. It feeds on chaos. Slow the breath, and you starve it. Still, part of me couldn't help imagining the worst. A lightning bolt striking a nearby tree, splitting it, sending shards flying, the rock I leaned against vibrating with a charge so strong it could stop my heart. I'd read stories. People struck miles from where the lightning hit, the current travelling through wet ground or stone. I tried not to think about it, but every rumble reminded me how small I really was out there. The temperature dropped fast. Mountain storms do that. One moment you're sweating under the sun, and the next you can see your breath. I stripped off my soaked shirt and wrung it out, teeth chattering. My fingers were numb, clumsy. I pulled my spare wool layer from the pack and managed to get it on before my hands stopped obeying entirely. The damp fabric scratched, but it was warmth, or something close to it. A flash so bright turned the world white, followed instantly by a deafening crack. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I flinched, curling in on myself, forehead to knees. For a heartbeat, the cave hummed, a faint vibration in the rock, like the mountain itself groaned. The sound faded into a long, low rumble that seemed to travel down through the earth. That was when I realised I wasn't breathing. I forced air back into my lungs and laughed once, a short, sharp bark. Fear can twist your mind in strange ways. You start to talk to yourself, to the storm, to the mountain. Anything to remind yourself you still exist. The rain intensified downpour to something gentler. But every flash of lightning showed the same furious curtain of water and the wind whipping it sideways. The world beyond that crack might as well have been another planet. Cold settled into my bones like it had been waiting for a chance. My hands were stiff, my jaw sore from clenching. I knew hypothermia didn't need freezing temperatures to set in. It just needed wet, wind, and time. And I had all three. I fumbled through my pack, trying to be careful not to soak what little dry gear I had left. I found my emergency blanket, a flimsy bit of silver mylar that crackled in the dark, and wrapped it tight around my shoulders. The noise it made was almost comical, a sharp crinkle in the deep growl of thunder, but it trapped the heat enough that I stopped shaking quite so violently. Sitting still, though, left too much space for the mind to wander. Every instinct screamed, move, run, survive, but there was nowhere to go. So instead, I watched the rivulets of water trace tiny paths along the stone. I tried naming them like creeks. Lost Creek, Quick Water Run, Fool's Stream. Anything to stay alert, to keep fear from taking over. The mountain didn't care about me, and I knew it. But giving those trickles names made me feel less like prey. Another blinding flash struck close, too close. The light filled the crack like a camera flash an inch from my eyes, followed by a roar that seemed to come from inside my skull. For a moment, I smelled something burning, faint and distant. Maybe a tree split open above. I didn't dare peek out to confirm it. The air itself felt charged. Every breath prickled. Then, silence. Not the end of the storm. Storms don't end that suddenly. But a strange pause, as if everything held its breath. The rain slackened to a steady hiss, and the thunder moved off to the east. I didn't believe it at first. I just sat there, still as stone, waiting for another flash to shatter the illusion. None came. When I finally leaned out, the world was washed raw and silver grey. Mist hung low, curling around the treetops below. Everything dripped between ridges. Then, a second rumble came, closer this time, ending with the sharp crack of something giving way. My gut went cold. Rockfall. The rain had loosened the hillside above me. I froze, scanning the slope in the mist. Visibility was barely 30 feet, but I caught movement. A scatter of pebbles bouncing past, followed by a stream of mud. Instinct screamed, run, but there was nowhere safe to go yet. The narrow crack I'd sheltered in was halfway up the slope. Retreating back inside would trap me if the whole thing slid. I ducked low, eyes darting for another option. That's when I saw it. A cluster of firs down the incline, their roots gripping the hillside like fists. Trees often stop debris flows, their trunks acting like barriers. If I could reach them, maybe I'd have a chance. I didn't think twice. I tightened my pack straps and started scrambling downhill. My boots slipped on wet moss, sending me skidding the first few feet. I caught myself on a root, heart hammering. Behind me came the sharp, dry crack of boulders breaking loose, and then the unmistakable roar of movement, like a freight train made of dirt and stone. I didn't look back. I ran. The ground shook beneath my feet. I could hear rocks tumbling and branches snapping, a chaos that felt both deafening and distant, like it was happening in a dream. I half ran, half slid toward the firs, using my hands to steady myself. The rain had softened everything to mud, and every step was a gamble. Just as I reached the first trunk, a wave of debris surged past on my left. a blur of brown and grey, water and rock mixed together. It wasn't a full landslide, thank God, but more than enough to bury me if I'd hesitated. I clung to that tree and pressed my cheek to its bark, gasping. The air was filled with the hiss of falling rain and the grinding rumble of rocks still shifting above. It went on for what felt like forever, before finally tapering off into silence again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold. When I finally loosened my grip, I turned to look up the slope. My little refuge, the split in the ruined hillside behind me, whispered a quiet "thank you" to the tree that had held me steady, and started down into the fog. The trail had become a river of mud, half washed out, the switchbacks now a guess more than a path. Each step sank, squelched or slid, and the effort of staying upright was almost more than I had left in me. The storm had passed, but its ghost lingered in every sound. The distant drip of water, the creak of overburdened branches, the sigh of the wind moving through soaked pines. The forest felt different after the violence of it all, cleansed and raw, like it too was catching its breath. I moved carefully, keeping my eyes on the slope below. My goal was simple: find a dry patch, any patch, where I could make camp without fear of sliding into oblivion. The temperature had dropped again, and the air was heavy with that clean, metallic scent that follows lightning. I knew I couldn't make it to the trailhead before nightfall, not in this muck, not with every muscle shaking from cold and adrenaline. Survival wasn't about covering miles anymore. It was about staying warm, staying dry, staying alive until morning. A mile, maybe less, down the mountain, I found what I needed. The slope levelled out into a small basin where runoff had carved a shallow groove between two mossy boulders. One of them overhung just enough to create a narrow, dry ledge underneath, barely wide enough to lie on, but dry. To anyone else, it might have looked like nothing. To me, it looked like salvation. I dropped my pack, peeled off my soaked layers, and replaced them with what little dry clothing I had left. My hands were numb and clumsy, but I managed to get my small stove going, more for the comfort of its hiss and glow than for any real warmth. Steam rose from my sleeves as I held them close, and for the first time since the thunder began, I let my shoulders relax. Outside, the fog thickened until it was hard to tell where the sky ended and the earth began. Every now and then, a drop of water would fall from the rock above, tapping gently on the metal cup beside me. Everything unnecessary, the noise, the pride, the illusion of control, and left me with only what mattered: warmth, breath, and the humbling truth that survival is sometimes nothing more than finding the smallest dry place in a very big, wild world.